Mangino. Welcome to the Mangino Talks Pittsburgh podcast. I've been a talk radio host for half of my life and nearly half of that in Pittsburgh. And so on my podcast, we talk about everything that matters to us all, from current events to Pittsburgh history, social issues to sports, politics, to practical day-to-day life. And on the political side of things, there's a recent poll that's out from Quinnipiac University looking at Governor Shapiro, Senators Bob Casey and John Fetterman, and the presidential race. And the most interesting of all the polling is really about the presidential race and how close it is. Just 1 point separating President Biden and Donald Trump is the 1 point favored at this time. Now, the margin of error is around 4%, and it's really, really early. You know, the one polling I'm looking forward to seeing is the generic polling. Like Biden up against a generic Republican, I think he gets beat pretty handily. But then again, I also think that Trump up against a generic Democrat, he gets beat rather handily. But because there's so much uncertainty about both of them, in some ways, it may actually be a repeat of 2016 if it's just the two of them, of which one isn't hated the most or disliked the most. Let's talk about this. With me, Doug Saltzman. He's a political and polling analyst, and he joins us now on Mangino Talks. Doug, welcome. Great to have you.
Thanks for having me on. First time I've been on your podcast. I feel privileged. I didn't wear my tuxedo, though, as I did one time with you on. But I appreciate the chance to talk to you.
Well, I wish that you were wearing your tuxedo. I would have thought that this would be important enough for that, considering it's such a momentous occasion for us both.
Well, and considering we're not doing video here, I will now change my comment and say, yes, I am wearing my my tuxedo.
All right, let's talk
about... But I did
about...
wear one into a studio one time, yeah.
Yes, you did. Recall. Yes, you did. And I was very concerned about that for anybody who may have missed it, because you came in wearing an overcoat. And I couldn't tell what you were wearing under your overcoat. I wasn't sure if you had a bunch of watches and cigarette singles that you were considering selling or something, or maybe you were just naked under your overcoat. I definitely wasn't expecting the tuxedo, that's for sure.
And I had it buttoned right up to the top to hide the bow tie. So, yeah, I can understand. At any moment you thought it would flash, that would be it. Yeah.
All right, let's talk about the polling from Quinnipiac, and we'll start off with Governor Josh Shapiro. The numbers looking good for him. 57% of registered voters in the state say that they approve of his performance. 23% disapprove. 20% just, I'm guessing, aren't sure who the governor is at this point. Do you think does that explain why they don't have an opinion at all on his performance?
Right. I mean, he's very new right now, although he's been attorney general for 6 years leading up to that. But still, this poll was dealing with how he's doing as governor. So a lot of people may not have an opinion. In fact, probably the first thing they thought about, and this poll talks about that, is how he handled the Interstate 95 disaster near Philadelphia.
Yes.
So other than that, that generally means things are going smoothly. If you don't hear about the governor early on, that means things are going well for him or her. And I think that's the case with Shapiro. He came in very smooth. He had nominees for his various cabinet posts from both sides of the aisle, obviously more Democrats and Republicans, but from that standpoint, a very different approach to governing.
What I thought was interesting was the 8% that disapprove of his handling of the I-95 bridge collapse. Now, you have to have people who just will not like. How do you look at a governor and say, okay, the bridge is back up in 2 weeks, and say, I disapprove of that?
I think that's just people who, one, misunderstood the question.
Okay.
Two, are conservative right-wing Republicans who just are not going to approve of anything the governor's doing because he happens to be a Democrat. And that works both ways. If it were a Republican governor, you have a certain amount of Democrats that would never approve of anything they're doing. Mm-hmm. But yeah, at 74%, and then the others may not have heard about it. Yes, and those of us in this world, we heard all about what happened in Philadelphia.
Right.
But you had 26% who either had no opinion or disapproved of how he handled that. It was incredible that they got that up and running so quickly. And this wasn't a small bridge in some small county. this was a major thoroughfare from Boston to Miami. And amazing that they were able to get that up and running. They did a great job. PennDOT folks should be applauded.
Going back to his general approval numbers, to some extent, this is just a honeymoon phase, right? But I'm also wondering, to what extent is there a different tone in the governor's office as compared to what Wolf had for 8 years?
Yeah, certainly from the people I've talked to in Harrisburg on both sides of the aisle, both staffers and lobbyists, it's a whole nother world. His administration is very approachable. He's part of negotiations. His staffers are out there meeting with people. They're willing to look at both sides of the aisle. I recently interviewed somebody from the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, and he could not say any more things about how different it is dealing with the Shapiro administration. Now, they don't always agree with him, of course, on issues, but they said at least he's approachable, and his administration's approachable. That wasn't always the case in the previous administration, and even before and after pandemic. It's not as if the pandemic shut it down. It was a very different type of governing by the previous governor, Governor Wolf. A whole new world, I've heard, and that's the words multiple people have described dealing with the Shapiro administration.
There was a photo of Shapiro and Biden and Fetterman together in Philadelphia regarding the bridge collapse. And one of them, in my mind, clearly looked presidential, and it was Shapiro. Your thoughts about that?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I think Shapiro, obviously, they always joke, anybody who ever becomes attorney general wants to be governor. There's an organization called the National Association of Attorneys General, NAAG, and even among themselves, they refer to it as the National Association of Aspiring Governors. So they all want to be governor someday when you're attorney general. But beyond that, Governor Shapiro, given his age, made me feel old. I'm 10 years older than the governor these days. But no, he clearly has something, more ideas down the road. Of course, you can only serve 2 terms as governor, whether he wants to run for the U.S. Senate someday or of course, run for national office, vice president or president. He's certainly young enough to do that. He'll only be in his 50s when he's done with 8 years, if he gets reelected, 8 years as governor. So, yeah, he's very smooth, very professional, and looks the part. Certainly different if you're standing next to John Fetterman and the way he dresses. Right. You know, he can dress however he wants, but it's a whole nother world.
It sure is. We'll get to Fetterman coming up in a moment. Let's go to Bob Casey if we could. His approval numbers, 44% to 32% disapproval. It looks as though just standing by himself, he could legitimately be challenged by someone. David McCormick continues to ponder the possibilities, but isn't getting in, and there really isn't anybody else that's stepping up the challenge. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, it's interesting. You know, he's a very quiet U.S. senator, and this is not meant as an insult. The jokes are at times that he could get arrested for loitering at one of his own events because he's just so laid back. And even when you hear interviews, and I've interviewed him, you know, people say, I know there's a pulse there, but he's not bombastic. You think of the days of a U.S. senator, my old boss, Arlen Specter, or Rick Santorum, or John Hines. You know, they just commanded a room wherever they happened to be. Bob Casey's very different. And generally, when you're that low key, your approval ratings are okay because you're not upsetting people one way or the other. Mm-hmm. But it's very interesting. And I've seen multiple polls that has him around 45% approval rating. So it's not just one poll that's gone bad. But yeah, 44% approval rating is very low for a 2-term incumbent senator who he's not had a scandal. You don't hear things going bad.
Right.
Frankly, you know, sad as weird as it sounds, you did mention, you know, it was announced that he had some cancer he was dealing with. Generally, your polling jumps when something like that happens, which is odd, but it does. But yeah, the numbers are very interesting to see that 32% disapproval rating. That's not unusual because you can have the Republicans far right who may not like a Democratic senator. But yeah, I was surprised by those low numbers.
But Doug, why isn't he getting a challenger? Why is it taking time for anybody like a McCormick to even decide to get in this race? What do you think is causing the second thoughts?
Well, when you think about the amount of money that was spent last year in that race against Fetterman, who was not a strong candidate, frankly, and Republicans fought with each other in that primary. John Fetterman came out of the primary with a huge win over Connor Lamb. Connor Lamb really got crushed in that primary. And so I think they're looking at, are we gonna beat this guy, Bob Casey? How much money are we gonna have to spend? They just spent tens of hundreds of millions just a year and a half ago. And the idea is, does somebody want to self-fund with it like a Dave McCormick, or are they going to be able to raise the money? Or do you simply wait a while, and then if you wait long enough, then you'll find out you're the only candidate. It makes things a lot simpler when you don't have to spend tens of millions of dollars just in the primary alone.
Yes.
Like what happened last year in the Senate primary for the Republicans.
Well, see, here's my thinking on this, and you tell me where you think I may be wrong. Considering that Mastriano is not going to run, and I think that because he would be running against maybe one other candidate, like a McCormick, that he would get beat rather handily on the Republican side. He needs many more to run in order to be able to have that strength, kind of like a Trump. And then on top of that, if it were to go heads up against Casey, no matter what Casey's numbers are, there's no way that Mastriano is going to win. So he would experience another, just absolute pummeling at the polls. But when you look at McCormick, I think his biggest reason for not wanting to declare himself as the candidate for the U.S. Senate as the Republican is because he recognizes the polling we're going to talk about in a little bit here that shows Trump is in the lead handily. He's going to win the nomination, but then he more than likely is not going to win the presidency. He's not had coattails when he ran when he ran in the first place. He's had a difficult time being able to keep Republican support. He's not had success in 18, 20, or the 22 midterms. He doesn't want to have to campaign with a guy who is under federal indictment. But then again, you can't campaign without the guy if he's the top of the ticket. And so I see the biggest reason why McCormick's sitting this thing out is you don't want to be associated with Trump, and it just there's no good side of being with Trump in a swing state like Pennsylvania.
Yeah, I think Dr. Oz was doing better in polling before the president or the former president at that point, Donald Trump, endorsed him. He was doing better in the polling. And how do you, if a former president wants to come along who's running for re-election, which hasn't happened since the early 1900s, to have a president lose and then come back and run again, how do you say no to his endorsement? Immediately, that just shows very negative on the former president, and it's going to hurt any Republican running if he doesn't accept the endorsement of Donald Trump. So it's a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation. And you talked about coattails too, which are really not entirely, but certainly a thing of the past on both sides of the aisle. You think when President Biden won Pennsylvania in the general election, at the same time, Tim DeFore, a Republican, won as Auditor General, and it was an open seat. And then Stacey Garrity beat an incumbent state treasurer in the same election. So, yeah, the days of it just being a full sweep, and that's so rare to beat an incumbent row officer, a statewide row officer, as Stacey Garrity did, hasn't happened since 1988. A campaign I was actually managing at one point. Barbara Hafer won for Auditor General over the incumbent Don Bailey. It just doesn't happen. And it happened last year when the presidential candidate of the opposite party actually won.
So it looks at this point that Bob Casey, he may go unchallenged, not only within the primary for the Democrats, he may go unchallenged with the Republican serious challenger. He may get just a token opposition.
Yeah, I'd be very surprised if he went unchallenged, but certainly it might be one of those situations where the National Republican Campaign Committee or the Senatorial Campaign Committee, the RNC, just may not be supporting that candidate. They're going to say all the right things,
right?
Online and that, but they may not be full behind it. And that has happened before.
Are you tempted to run? And here's why. That way, forevermore, you would be referred to as former U.S. Senate candidate Doug Saltzman.
Yeah, no thanks. I enjoy what I do in life, and people ask me for a long time if I ever wanted to run for state representative. Or I remember I was at some banquet dinner one time, and the one guy at the table said to me, "Doug, you really ought to run. I think you'd be a good state representative. Why don't you run? Tell me why you won't." I said, well, because the guy you sit next to, I like a lot. And it was Ralph Kaiser, and he was the state rep from my area. I said, I like him. I'm not going to run against him. And the guy got sort of embarrassed. Ralph started to laugh because he knew I was his constituent. And if I ran, I'd be running against him. But no, yeah, it's a very tough life. And we'll see what happens. I'd be very surprised if Dave McCormick at some point just simply doesn't decides to run. Because once you're the candidate, then all the attention's on you, all the examination, all the vetting. And the longer you wait to make an announcement, the more you can not have to worry about being the candidate. Even if you're an incumbent president, think of how long until Joe Biden announced he was going to run for re-election officially and made that announcement. Mm-hmm. So yeah, you can do a lot of behind the scenes stuff and not have that the issue of being the candidate, if that makes sense.
Yeah. How about this? Senator Fetterman, his polling is out too, and according to the way the story is written in the Post-Gazette, Fetterman, who was treated for depression earlier this year, was in negative territory. 50% of voters disapproving of his performance in office, 39% approving. And I got to tell you, the number that's the most surprising to me is the 39%. Unless you're talking about a sympathy vote in a poll to a pollster, I want to know what anybody would see in the past 6 months, or the first 6 months of his time as a U.S. Senator, that would say, oh, yeah, I'm happy with the way he's handling himself in Washington.
Yeah, I mean, there are those, and I was with a polling organization as far back as 1986, and that type of thing has not changed. There are simply those in a party, whether it's to the right or the left, Republican or Democrat, who are going to approve of the candidate in their party or the incumbent, no matter what. So in Pennsylvania, has the majority of Democrats registered, but you're right, 39% would have to reflect those who have a sympathy vote perhaps for him because he's had physical problems, of course, mental problems. They might just, we're going to cut this guy a break so he can get himself better. But a 39% approval rating early on is unheard of because generally you haven't done anything for people to disapprove of yet.
Right.
So that's a very low number. Wish Fetterman all the best. I've talked to people who've worked in D.C. and he just really struggles. I mean, of course, they have the videos for him when he's on the floor of the Senate or if he's in a committee meeting or a Senate hearing. But that's all show. That's not where stuff gets done when you're a U.S. Senator. It gets done in hallways and stairwells and elevators and the Senate gym, the Senate dining room. It's a whole different world from being certainly mayor of Braddock or even lieutenant governor, where you can almost set your schedule yourself at times. The stress level, the amount of work required to be a U.S. Senator is nothing most people have ever seen or imagined. It's really nonstop.
And most recently, 2 opportunities for him to say something, and where he should have realistically anticipated those opportunities to speak. One at a Senate committee hearing regarding the collapse of I-95, and then when he is with the president and the governor and is given an opportunity to speak regarding the collapse, just sounds completely, I mean, he sounds horrible. And you got to wonder, to what extent is he still dealing with the aspects of depression? What is he dealing with when it comes to trying to fully recover from his stroke? And then you couple that with the embarrassing look that he presents. You were now a U.S. Senator. It's one thing, you're mayor of Braddock and you want to run around in a hoodie and a pair of shorts, fine. You just happen to show up at the bridge collapse here in Pittsburgh and you're wearing your hoodie and your shorts, fine. But my goodness, as a U.S. Senator, if you're going to go and give a presentation or be a part of other U.S. Senators standing before a podium, put a jacket and tie on. If you're going to go and meet the president in Philadelphia with all these other people who all knew they were going there too, can you please put at least a jacket and a button-down shirt on? Is that asking for too much, Doug?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. It's just a matter of respect. And whether the president's a Democrat or Republican, if you're the same party or the opposite party, you just show respect. And so Yeah, that's always been his shtick about how he dresses. And when you go into a rest stop on an interstate highway and you see those pictures of the governor, lieutenant governor, secretary of transportation, they're all dressed up. He always had just sort of a gray shirt on, because that was his thing.
Right.
But when you're meeting with someone, the governor of your state, being there with your fellow U.S. Senator Bob Casey, the president of the United States, whether you like him or not or agree with him, you need to show respect for that office, that person. And now, with his stroke issues and depression issues, people look at that and say, is that why he's dressing like that? You and I know he's dressed like that forever, but other people for the first time will see that and say, my gosh, really? That's how he showed up? And I think when Biden was in town and the bridge collapse happened in the city of Pittsburgh, at that point, Fetterman was running and wasn't even going to be there that day because being with President Biden wasn't going to help his campaign because Biden's numbers were so low. But he had to be there then because of that bridge collapse.
Right.
And he showed up in shorts and a hoodie, and he was wearing earbuds on wires the whole time he was with them. And so that's just not the right impression to give, especially now. Not everybody saw him like that before or knew that was his shtick.
Mm-hmm.
But now when it is, and people say, does this have some connection to his depression, does he not know how to dress properly? Which I don't think really isn't the case. Surely somebody around him, family, staff,
you got to put Doug, he has no excuse. He's married. This is one of the things that I learned once I got remarried was that I apparently was doing it wrong before. And then now my wife is one who regularly, comments, I like the shirt, but I think that shirt would look better with these pants or that jacket. And so I'm always getting advice and stuff like that. And I would think that Giselle, she's always, a fashionista. I mean, she's dressed to the T all the time. It isn't as though he doesn't have somebody who could give him good sound advice about what to put on. And my goodness, for crying out loud, just a white shirt and a black suit and you're good. It's just a different color tie every day.
Right. Not everybody's expecting you. You should wear a tie when you're a U.S. Senator, but at least wear a coat.
Right.
I don't care if you got a golf shirt on underneath. But just this idea of these cutoffs and these hoodies,
just terrible.
And it just someone looks at that and said, "This is not a grown-up almost." I'm not saying he's immature, but that's just not a way you dress. I remember years ago, some NCAA team won a championship, and they went to the White House, and some of the women were wearing flip-flops in the White House, and they made us stink over that.
Oh, man.
Oh, come on. But, yeah, it's just not appropriate and looks unprofessional.
It does.
And that's a shame because it's a simple solution. Some people just aren't good speakers, and so, but his speaking abilities obviously have been affected by his stroke.
Mm-hmm.
But then when you don't sound or look the part,
right,
then it's a twofer, and it's not a good twofer.
Well said. Let's go to the other story that's in the Post-Gazette regarding the poll from Quinnipiac. We talked a little bit about the Biden-Trump race, and 47-46, Trump with a 1-point margin at this point, leading Joe Biden. What does that tell you, that you could have an indicted man, not only what's happening in New York, but the most serious things with the federal indictment, and have an individual like that lead by 1 point over a sitting president?
And what also that means, too, is that independents and Democrats are supporting him, because you can't get to that type of number in Pennsylvania as a Republican. I mean, to win in the state, you need 15 to 20% of Democrats to support you. When I think about Doug Mastriano just running for governor, he never got beyond about 7 or 8% of Democrats. And you're never going to win statewide in Pennsylvania if you can only get that. You need at least 15 to 20% to hit that 50% plus one threshold. So these numbers showing that Trump in Pennsylvania has 47%. He's getting some independent and Democrat votes. That's the most surprising here. And there are very few undecideds. If you add those up, you're well over 90%.
Yes.
So there's very few. Although I don't know how you could not. That's even though I've been doing polling analysis for 30 some years, I'm always amazed how someone could not have an opinion at this point about whether you would support Trump or Biden. If there's not a third choice. If there's a third choice, Yes, that's different.
And
But how could you not have an
I
opinion?
think there's going to be a third choice, but we'll get to that a little bit later. I mentioned earlier about this idea of a generic where you have Biden against anybody Republican or you have Trump against somebody that's Democrat besides the presumed front runners. I don't see Biden leading in a poll like that, and I don't see Trump leading in a poll like that.
Yeah, and I've always referred to those as sort of fantasy polls. If it's just, would you vote for Biden or a Republican, or would you vote for Trump or a Democrat? Obviously, in your brain, you're not going to come up with, a really bad candidate. The generic candidate is going to be a good candidate in your brain. So yeah, you would, and something like that. Most people, at least I would think they would hope that, whoever they're thinking would be better than the other person because it's just imaginary. Am I making sense? If you know what I mean on that.
I do, and I see where you're coming from. What I'm thinking about is that we could see a repeat of 2016 in the sense that in swing states, people by the very narrowest of margins just decided, okay, who do I not like the most, and I'm going to go with the other one. And I think that has the potential of doing the same thing again in 24 if it's Biden-Trump, because Biden in 20 was just the reasonable alternative to Trump that most of America didn't want. And now Biden doesn't have that same benefit going into 24. It's a different way of looking at him in the presidency and his age and his health and everything else that goes along with it.
Right. It's interesting. You talked about 2016, the first presidential race ever where both candidates had higher negatives than positives. That had never happened in the history of polling. You might have one candidate with higher negatives, but not both. And both Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump had higher negatives than positives. And so people were going in basically voting against the other person. Yes. And that certainly happened in 2020 when there was such an upsurge of people just simply voting against Donald Trump. And Hillary Clinton had issues in 2016. Even members of her own party were upset because the Democratic National Committee clearly was supporting her during the primary, and they're not supposed to do that if there's challenges. So she had some of her own folks against simply her own folks, and I said Democrats were mad because Bernie Sanders didn't get a fair shake, and they simply, obviously, they weren't going to vote for Trump, but they weren't going to vote. They decided just to sit out the election.
We have, 12 Republicans total that are campaigning for the Republican primary, one Republican who's still thinking about getting in. These individuals, besides Trump, DeSantis, maybe Chris Christie, the former governor of New Jersey, Pence, all of the rest of them, what are they doing?
Well, in a situation like that, a lot of them simply want to get some idea out there. Maybe someday they'll write a book. I mean, it sounds almost silly. Maybe a position in the administration. You mentioned how you have the favorites, of course, Trump and DeSantis. Then you've got contenders, and then you've got your long shots. And then, as you said, a maybe. And it's just amazing how many people are in right now. And even though Democrats at times will grab somebody that people aren't expecting, a Jimmy Carter, a Bill Clinton, even a Barack Obama, Republicans tend to go with the people who seem obvious. In this case, a DeSantis, a Trump, and then the contenders, like you said, a Nikki Haley, perhaps, and Mike Pence, the former Vice President, Tim Scott, South Carolina Senator, African American, and then you have all the others. Ted Cruz would probably also fall into that category, although he said he's not going to be running this time around. But there's long shots, names that you may not even know. Democrat or Republicans tend not to go with the long shots or the folks who are not well known, but they just want to get the attention out there. Maybe they've got a show coming up on Newsmax or Fox, and that'll help them with some PR there. Plus, a lot of politicians enjoy the run. We always say there's some that enjoy running more than governing. Some enjoy governing more than running. But a lot of them do like the run. They like that attention.
This field, the way that it's currently made up with upwards of 12 different Republicans, is it not almost impossible for Trump to lose the primary, the nomination with a field that's this large, that at the only real chance of him not winning this, barring something more severe that would come out, I can't imagine what that would be. The only way that the Republicans have a chance of nominating somebody else is you have to get it down to where there are maybe 1, 2, at most 3 contenders to him, more than likely 1 or 2.
Yeah, usually incumbents, you want a lot of competition because, you can win it with not a majority, but just a plurality in most states. You can have 6 people running in a primary, you can win with 30%. And some states have runoffs, most do not, especially in a primary.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, the fact that only 49% of Pennsylvanians are supporting a former president in a primary is interesting. That's a low number for an incumbent. Not an incumbent, but a former president. It's so rare to say that. The last time we would have talked about something like this would have been Teddy Roosevelt winning in the early 1900s when he came back 4 years later and won back the White House as a member of the Bull Moose Party. So it doesn't happen a lot. But in this situation, those numbers are lower than the president obviously would like. That he's got less than 50% of those in a poll supporting his winning the nomination again. And I think as more and more comes out, the issues on the New York indictments isn't going to cause him problems, but in my opinion and other legal folks' opinions, but, hiding classified documents at your house is one thing. If you had them, get them up right away, like Biden did, or like Vice President Pence did. Mm-hmm. But Trump wouldn't allow them to take them right away. And so people, it's always the cover up, breaking into the Democratic National Headquarters at Watergate, not that big a deal. Covering it up, there's the big deal. It's always the cover up. It's so often that seems to take down politicians.
But do you think the cover up is going to do it this time? Because I got to tell you, I don't see a reason for Republicans that are now deciding to stay with him through the indictment and then what they know at this point and what he's being accused of and what even very conservative Republican legal scholars are saying regarding the charges against him, and the party is still backing him. Granted, 49% may be a low number for a former president who wanting to be back in office again, but to me, it's an amazingly high number considering that former president is facing a federal charges of mishandling the most secret of government documents and in a cavalier manner, sharing them with people who had no business seeing them.
Right, and the idea of having the audio of that, and there's some question: right. Who did that audio? Did he record that himself just to show his chutzpah? I'll even record these conversations. His famous comment that he could kill somebody in Times Square and still get elected. That sort of level of thought by him. But so I can see your argument too. That's still 49%, but I'm sure his campaign wishes it were a lot higher than that. In Pennsylvania, again, there's one thing getting through that primary, it's hard to believe it's only 7 months away at this point. The first primaries in January,
right?
Which is hard to believe considering we still have an election this year, and that's a shame. These local elections get overlooked so often when you have a presidential, primaries literally 2 months after the general election in November. But there's going to be a lot of attention played in the last 7 months. It's amazing how much can change in such a short time in politics.
Yes. I'm going to make a prediction, and I don't think it's all that bold of one, but I think that Biden, if he lives to this, is going to win the election, and I think it's going to be because of Liz Cheney. Saw her in an interview on NBC News the other day, and she is still absolutely committed to doing all that she can to keeping Trump out of the White House. I can easily see her declaring that she's going to run as an independent, give enough Republicans that conscientious objection vote. Okay, I'm not going to go vote Biden. I just can't do that, but I'll go Cheney and then become the spoiler. And the same way Ross Perot was able to get Clinton into the White House and keep him there, Liz Cheney is going to keep Trump out of the White House.
Yeah. I mean, spoilers can happen and have happened. You mentioned the ultimate example there. I think if you polled most people, they would say that Clinton won with 60% of the vote his first time in 1992, when he actually got 43%. George H.W. Bush with 37, Perot with 17 or 18%. But it also happens in primaries. And when you think of Florida, where Al Gore lost by less than 600 votes, and Ralph Nader got over 80,000 votes. And what percent of Ralph Nader voters would have voted for Gore compared to voting for Bush?
Right.
It's probably 90. The poll I saw was 95% at one time. Gore would have won Florida if Nader hadn't been in that race.
Mm-hmm.
So the spoilers can play a major role, and it's not as if you have to be a spoiler for the whole country. You can just spoil one state. And I'm sure every day Al Gore gets up, he grits his teeth about Ralph Nader, who clearly kept him out of the White House. So it's interesting what would happen with a Liz Cheney. And obviously, she's not going to endorse other Republicans. They would not want her endorsement. Other Republicans running, that would hurt their cause. I could see somebody jumping in.
Do you see her running?
I don't know. To run a national campaign, you need an incredible amount of organization. It's very difficult to run as an independent in a general election. Perot did it. He self-funded. It was just this anti-George Bush effort, which started in the primary. When you think about Pat Buchanan beat him in New Hampshire in that primary that year. So there was a huge incumbent, George Bush effort at that point, following Read My Lips, no new taxes, then raise taxes. I don't see that happening with, I don't see a real big anti-Joe Biden within the Democratic Party. It's a different situation, I think.
Yeah. See, I'm seeing this happening where Biden running, he'll get the financial support that he needs. But I also think that if Liz Cheney decides that she wants to run, she will get a tremendous amount of money from the mega donors within the Democratic Party. And I think that there will be a lot of people who are in the Republican Party who are saying they just want Trump done. And one more defeat will help make that possible. And put together the super PACs where nobody gets to know where the money really came from, and run the ads in support of her, and be able to finally finish this thing off for Trump.
Again, 7 months in normal people's lives isn't that long a time. In politics, it's a lifetime. Anything can happen between now and then.
Yes.
And you look at some of the numbers in the past where, Bill Clinton won, and by inauguration day, he and George H.W. Bush polling numbers were almost identical. You think of something crazy like that.
Okay.
Bill Clinton winning big in 1992, having a disastrous midterm election. The Republicans took over everything, which they hadn't done in decades in the House, especially. And then 2 years later, Bill Clinton gets reelected. So you never know what's coming down the pike in the world of politics. There are still those, and I've talked to some national political analysts who are not totally convinced Biden's actually going to run, which I find hard to believe. I don't know who else it could be. It couldn't be the vice president. Her numbers are worse than the president's. Whether it's someone like a Michelle Obama, and Oprah. I mean, I don't know who else it could possibly be. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is not Bobby Kennedy, his dad, not Jack Kennedy, not Ted Kennedy. He would have so many negatives within his own party. Although his numbers were interesting, what they are. I was surprised how many people are actually supporting him in this Quinnipiac poll.
Well, I think that may have been because of the shirtless picture that has been out. That may have played a role. Yeah. Like, oh, wow, he looks so buff. I want to go ahead and vote for him. What do you think about, real quick, what do you think about Newsom out of California? Is if he were to decide to run, do you think, cause I'm getting to a point to where Biden has to recognize, okay, you're just not at the point to where you can legitimately make the case to be president for 4 more years, except for the fact that you are likely to run up against Trump. Why not back out and tell Gavin Newsom, okay, you go ahead, or open up the primary and see what happens?
Right. And that would be very interesting, too. I mean, the support that Gavin Newsom would have, he survived a recall when, about 12 years later, a Democrat did not survive the recall in California. Of course, that's when Schwarzenegger was a whole different world, him getting elected,
Right.
very different than the most recent recall. But he would have instant name ID among Democrats, certainly in the primary, enormous voting base coming out of California naturally. But it would have to be a name like that. People say, what about Obama? I said, well, Obama could only actually serve 2 years. He can't run for re-election. A president can only serve 10 years, thanks to the amendment to the Constitution. So it would have to be somebody with such an enormous name ID, instantaneous, known nationally.
Mm-hmm.
And there aren't too many people that fall under that category, frankly, on the Democratic side. I think the idea was to have this vice president in line, Kamala Harris, but it just hasn't worked out for the administration.
No.
Her role in the administration has been so diminished. I think the closest vice presidency to hers would be LBJ. I mean, he was non-existent in the Kennedy years.
Wow.
They just pretended he wasn't there, and not just because he and Bobby hated each other, which they did. I'm way off topic here, but it's sort of funny. At one point, LBJ wasn't convinced he was going to be the running mate of Jack Kennedy in 1964. And Kennedy said, no, you are going to be my running mate. Just promise me if you ever become president, don't take away my brother's citizenship. Because the two of them hated each other so much, Bobby and LBJ. That's way off topic.
Yeah.
Kind of
Well, at some point, I think Biden really ought to consider getting somebody else as his vice presidential nominee, because a lot of people are going to be voting and saying, okay, I don't think that Biden's going to make it for 4 years. Who's next? And do I really want that person to be president? And I have a hard time believing that in a heads up between Trump and Kamala Harris, there's just no way. She gets smoked at that point. There's no way.
Exactly. And I mean, I think the most recent talk on something like this was George H.W. Bush picking a new running mate in 1992. Dan Quayle's numbers were so low, but not nearly as low as Kamala Harris's numbers. It's a very different situation. And the last time somebody changed vice presidents and picked up a new running mate would have been Gerald Ford in 1976. Of course, Nelson Rockefeller was his vice president.
Mm-hmm.
He was too moderate in the eyes of a lot of Democrats, or a lot of Republicans, rather. And then Ford decided on Bob Dole. And Bob Dole was his running mate in 1976. And that was in response. Reagan, this is political history here, but Reagan was really going after Ford in 76. And an odd twist, Reagan was complaining Nelson Rockefeller wasn't conservative enough. And then Pennsylvania suddenly kicked in, and Ronald Reagan decided that U.S. Senator from Pennsylvania, then Dick Schweiker, would be his running mate, who was very moderate as a Republican. So it was very strange dynamic there.
Very.
Back then. But yeah, I would think in a situation like this, you never want to change your running mate. But in this situation where Kamala Harris's numbers are so low,
right,
and that hasn't played a significant role in the administration. I don't think most people
would even notice.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness! Oh, so this really cool guy or gal is now going to be the vice president. Okay, I can get into that. Doug Saltzman joining us. Doug, thank you so much for making time for us. Do appreciate it.
You're welcome, Mangino. Thank you very much for having me on. Good luck with the podcast.
Thank you very much. Doug Saltzman, once again, political and polling analyst, joining us on Mangino Talks. Thank you very much for listening to the show. Please be sure to click the subscribe button so you don't miss an episode. For more on me and the show, be sure to visit manginotalks.com. If there's a topic you would like me to talk about or a guest that you would like me to have on, just send me an email at mangino@manginotalks.com. Follow me on your favorite social media platforms by using @Mangino Talks. And once you find me, please like, follow, subscribe, and share the pages with your friends and your family. And thanks once again for listening to the Mangino Talks podcast.